Rathlin Island is a picturesque gem enveloped by crystal-clear sapphire waters that harmonize with equally brilliant skies. This idyllic locale, home to a mere 125 residents, boasts a serene atmosphere that captivates its inhabitants. Located off the coast of Antrim, Rathlin Island represents the northernmost point of Northern Ireland, yet its striking beauty belies a tumultuous past. The island's history is marked by a series of dark events that contrast sharply with its enchanting landscape. Its allure has drawn countless individuals throughout the centuries, some of whom left an indelible mark on the land. It all began in the 8th century with the first Viking raid on Ireland, which led to the destruction of the island's church and the devastation of its community, resulting in the loss of countless lives. In 1306, Robert the Bruce, the Scottish king, sought refuge on Rathlin Island after being defeated by Edward I's forces. He and his men found sanctuary in what is now known as Bruce's Castle, owned by the Belies family. However, their hospitality would come at a great cost, as the Belies family later faced severe repercussions for their alliance with Bruce, losing their land and possessions to English retribution. Legend has it that Bruce and his men remain on the island, ensnared by a spell, resting in a cave where the castle once stood. When they awaken, it is said they will rise and reunite Rathlin with Scotland. The island has also been the site of numerous massacres. In 1557, Sir Henry Sidney led a devastating raid that obliterated much of the island's infrastructure. A few decades later, in 1575, hundreds of men, women and children from Clan MacDonald were brutally killed by forces led by Francis Drake and John Nares, who were sent to confront Scottish refugees. The anguished cries of children as they were torn from their mothers' arms still echo in the memories of those who recount the tragedy. In 1642, soldiers of the Argyll's Foot were dispatched to eliminate Catholic MacDonald relatives, the arch-enemies of Clan MacDonald in the Scottish Highlands. This massacre was conducted with chilling efficiency. Reports suggest that hundreds of MacDonald women were thrown from cliffs to their deaths below, with estimates of the total fatalities reaching as high as 3,000. The island's dark narrative continued into the 20th century, with the sinking of HMS Drake in 1917, resulting in the loss of 18 lives. The extensive history of death and destruction associated with Rathlin Island has rendered it a topic of fascination, even featured on the US paranormal investigation series Destination Truth, which aired an episode on March 17, 2011, discussing the haunting cries of the banshee often reported by locals. Among the many stories that Rathlin Island holds are those that elicit fear and curiosity alike, shared by those who have spent their lives on this storied land. One notable tale is that of the Rathlin West Light, a lighthouse established in the early 20th century to guide sailors through perilous waters. This enduring beacon has withstood countless storms and saved innumerable lives. However, not all who sought refuge at the lighthouse have departed safely. In the 1920s, a dedicated lightkeeper named James Mallister became known for his unwavering commitment to maintaining the light. One stormy night, he mysteriously vanished. Although his boat was later discovered wrecked against the rocks, his body was never recovered, leaving behind an enduring mystery that continues to haunt the island. The locals often whisper that James never truly departed. On a tranquil evening, I made my way to the lighthouse, eager to capture its beauty through my lens. As I ascended the winding path, an unexpected chill permeated the warm summer air, which I attributed to my imagination. Upon reaching the summit, I set up my camera and began to photograph the breathtaking scenery. Through the lens, however, I caught sight of a shadowy figure standing by the light, gazing intently at the sea. Startled, I lowered my camera, only to find the figure had vanished. Dismissing it as a trick of the light, I resumed my photography. Yet the figure re-emerged, this time nearer to the edge, as if searching for something lost. "Hello, is anyone there?" I called out, but only the wind and the distant crash of waves responded. Packing my belongings, I prepared to leave when a faint voice echoed behind me. The light must never go out. I turned swiftly, but once again I was met with empty air. A sudden drop in temperature washed over me, and an unsettling presence lingered beside me, sending a shiver down my spine. I hurried back down the path, glancing back to find the figure by the light once more, observing my departure. To this day, I am convinced that James Mallister remains a vigilant keeper of the lighthouse, ensuring its light endures. Rhin's Haunted Inn, the sole inn on Rathlin Island, has catered to travellers for centuries. Established in the 1700s, it has welcomed an array of guests, from fishermen and adventurers to fugitives. Yet not all who sought refuge here left in peace. In the mid-1800s, a notorious smuggler named Thomas O'Connell found himself cornered by British soldiers and sought sanctuary at the inn, hiding in a concealed cellar. When discovered, a violent confrontation erupted, leading to Thomas's demise. The cellar was sealed thereafter, never to be reopened. However, Thomas's spirit remains restless. During my stay at this intriguing establishment, I was captivated by its rich history and charm. The innkeeper, an elderly woman named Mrs. Donnelly, regaled me with tales of its past over a warm cup of tea by the fire. As midnight approached, I retreated to my room, only to be awakened by a loud thumping from below. Groggy, yet curious, I followed the sound to the main floor, where the noise appeared to emanate from beneath the floorboards. Recalling Mrs. Donnelly's mention of the old cellar, I sought her out and found her standing in the hallway, lantern in hand, her face ashen. "You heard it too," she remarked. "That's Thomas. He's restless tonight." Together, we approached the long-forgotten cellar door. The thumping intensified. With hesitation, Mrs. Donnelly unlocked the door, whispering, "He doesn't mean harm, but he wants to be found." As the door creaked open, we descended the narrow staircase into the dark, musty cellar, the air thick with the scent of damp earth. In the dim light of the lantern, we discerned a figure in the corner, its outline barely perceptible. "Thomas," Mrs. Donnelly called softly. The figure turned slowly, and I felt a chilling breeze sweep past me. The lantern flickered, and in that fleeting moment, I glimpsed his face, gaunt, with hollow eyes brimming with sorrow. He extended his hand toward us, and I could sense his profound sorrow. Just then, the lantern extinguished, plunging us into darkness. The rhythmic thumping ceased, leaving a heavy silence in the air. Mrs. Donnelly attempted to reignite the lantern, but the figure had vanished. "He merely wished to be remembered," she stated, her voice quivering. We quickly ascended the stairs, leaving the cellar door ajar. The following morning, the thumping had ceased, and the atmosphere felt lighter, as if a tremendous burden had been lifted. It appeared that Thomas's spirit had finally attained peace. As a fisherman, like my father before me, I had always heard the tales of Rathlin. I never truly believed in them until I experienced something inexplicable myself. One morning, around 4 a.m., my crew and I, 5 seasoned fishermen with over 20 years of experience, set out onto the water. The fish were biting vigorously until more boats arrived, causing them to scatter. We decided to take a break before heading into deeper waters, away from the recreational vessels. There was a small cave along the shores of Rathlin, not particularly large or deep, but just sufficient to provide shelter from the sun after a long day at sea. My crew and I anchored our boat just outside the entrance and secured it before venturing inside with our provisions. The cave measured approximately 30 feet deep and 10 feet wide. Although it was dim, the afternoon sunlight filtered in through the entrance. "Hey guys, come check this out," Mark called from the back of the cave, where he had sought a cooler, darker spot to rest. We hurried over to see what had captured his attention, only to be astonished by a small opening at the rear of the cave that we had never noticed before, despite our numerous visits. Taking turns, we squeezed through and emerged into an entirely new section of the cave, a circular chamber that was surprisingly cold and dark. Curious, we switched on our flashlights and began to explore this newfound space. After some time, we grew weary of our exploration and decided to sit down. "I'll make some tea," Mark announced. We all eagerly agreed as he prepared a small fire in the center of the cave. The air was stale, yet there was a comforting quality to it, almost as if it were gently enveloping us. Moments later, Mark positioned his kettle over the flames, using a long stick to hold it until the water reached a boil. We gathered around as he poured tea into our mugs. Just as he was about to pour tea into my cup, Mark's expression suddenly shifted to one of alarm. He froze mid-action, his eyes widening in terror as they scanned our group. I followed his gaze but saw nothing amiss, nothing to justify his fear, unless he harbored a phobia of the dark. Distracted, I returned my focus to my mug, eager for the warmth of the tea. That's when I noticed what had horrified Mark. Although there were 5 of us present, there were 6 hands visible to my left, an extra mug emerging from the shadows. A wave of dread washed over me as I hesitated to investigate further, terrified of what I might uncover. The realization settled in, and I began to feel an unsettling presence beside me, someone who most definitely did not belong in that cave. Mark mentioned that his hands trembled as he continued to fill the additional cup. As it retreated into the shadows, I finally gathered the courage to glance at the spot where the hand had withdrawn, only to find it empty. We all witnessed the event, yet none of us has been able to articulate it to this day, phantom sounds echoing through the ruins of the castle. Growing up, Robert the Bruce was a celebrated figure in my household. My father often claimed we were related to him, though I was never certain if that was fact or merely a product of his imagination. One day, he took me on a drive to the site where Rathlin Carl once stood, asserting that this was Bruce's residence. I, being a typical teenager, retorted, "He didn't actually live here." My father shot me a disapproving glare, but chose not to respond. "Come on," he urged, stepping out of the car and pulling me along with him. Reluctantly, I exited the vehicle. The location was picturesque, situated by the water, and I could only imagine the grandeur of Bruce's castle when it still stood. Now, only a few stones remained to signify its former glory. My father wandered through the crumbling remnants, seemingly absorbing the essence of the past. I felt a twinge of envy. His passion for Robert the Bruce was palpable. "So, tell me," I initiated, attempting to engage him. "What transpired here? Did Bruce die in this place?" "No," he replied. "Bruce passed away many years later, and the circumstances of his death remain uncertain. This is where he rallied his men after Edward's army defeated them." At that moment, the sound of galloping horses filled the air. Instinctively, my father and I turned in unison. The atmosphere was warm and the landscape appeared untouched. "What was that?" I inquired, my voice tinged with trepidation. "Horses," my father responded. "But where are they?" I pressed. He remained silent, his gaze scanning the horizon. It was a bright afternoon, yet an eerie tension enveloped us. Suddenly, we heard the horses' whinnies again, and the sound of hoofbeats grew louder and more pronounced, as if a great number were approaching, no more than 10 feet away. Then, a deep, commanding voice resonated. "We've come seeking refuge. Edward is on our trail." Just as swiftly as it had emerged, the voice vanished along with the sound of the horses. My father and I exchanged bewildered glances, at a loss for words. Finally, he gestured for us to return to the car. Since that day, we have never discussed the incident, nor has he ever suggested another visit to Bruce's castle.